Bible Commentary on the Book of Daniel. By Brian Pepper. Chapter 8. Introduction. We now come to where Daniel changes to Hebrew, from the Aramaic or Chaldean language. The prophecies from chapter 2 verse 4 to the end of chapter 7 are written in Chaldee. Why two languages are used is something that puzzles many scholars. However, it is believed that the Chaldeans had a particular interest in both the history and prophecies recorded in that section of Daniel. Seeing that from chapter 7 on, the prophecies mostly concern the church and God's people, they are revealed in the Hebrew language, for this is the tongue in which God chose to reveal all his counsels in the Old Testament. Daniel chapter 8 verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. The 1st year of Belshazzar was 540 BC. His 3rd year in which this vision was given would be 538 BC. Daniel was now an old man, he could have been about 88 years old. Daniel knew that the 70 years of the captivity prophesied by Jeremiah would soon expire, and he still lived in hope that he might live to see the promised restoration of his nation, to the land of their fathers. The previous vision he is referring to here is no doubt that of the 4 beasts of the previous chapter. Daniel chapter 8 verse 2. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw, that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Shushan. Daniel's statement indicates that he was not actually bodily present in Shushan, but rather that this is part of the vision. Shushan was the metropolis of the province of Elam, which was then in the hands of the Babylonians, and the king of Babylon had a royal palace there. It is better known today as Susa. Persian kings later used the city as a winter residence, and spent the rest of the year at Babylon or at Ecbatana. River of Ulai. This river is identified with the Ulai of the cuneiform tablets. The river passed Susa in a southerly and southeasterly direction. Daniel chapter 8 verse 3. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. There is no difficulty in identifying this symbol, as it is definitely explained by the angel in the 20th verse, to represent the kingdom of Medo-Persia, which had 2 horns. 2 related peoples, the Medes and the Persians, were united into one nation. The homeland of the Medes was in the mountainous parts of what is now called the west of Persia, and the east of Armenia. Historians know very little about the early days of the Medes. In 612 BC, formerly given as 606 BC, Cyaxares, king of the Medes, helped to destroy Nineveh and the other cities of Assyria. The Babylonians were confederated with the Medes in this destruction of Assyria, and the young king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, married the daughter of Cyaxares. A more or less peaceful relationship existed between these restless peoples until the rise of Cyrus the Persian. Cyrus revolted against Astyages, the son of Cyaxares, and by his victory in 550 BC, the Medes became absorbed into the rising Persian Empire. However, the Persians treated the Medes more as partners than as a subject race. Many prominent Medes were employed as officials and generals, and the new sovereigns spent their summers in Ecbatana, the old capital of Media, their winters being spent at Susa, which had a milder climate. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. This is a clear and accurate statement of the relationship between these 2 peoples. The Persians became the dominant members of the Union, but the Medes were never treated as inferiors or as a subjugated people, but rather as confederates. The empire is always known as the Medo-Persian Empire. As the Persian Empire sprawled out from India to Ethiopia, it certainly was not inferior to its predecessors in either extent or in population. It is also true that no other nations or peoples could withstand its power during the time allotted to it by divine providence. Daniel chapter 8 verse 4. I saw the ram pushing westward, and northward, and southward, so that no beasts might stand before him, Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. In the days of its greatness, this empire of the Medo-Persians covered a far greater geographical extent than did the preceding empire of Babylonia. A frequent title of the Persian monarch was King of Kings, or King of Countries. Daniel chapter 8 verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. In verse 21 the angel also explains that the he-goat means Greece, and the notable horn between his eyes as representing the first king of Greece, who was Alexander the Great. While almost universally called the King of Greece, because he was of Greek descent, and because he made himself king of all the various Greek states before he set out for the conquest of Asia. Alexander was primarily king of Macedon, and many writers have adopted the fashion of calling the empire he founded the Macedonian Empire. But his ambition was to go to war against Persia not as a Macedonian, but as the successor of Achilles and the head of all Greece, that thus he might avenge the former invasions of Greece by the Persian kings Darius and Xerxes. The goat had a notable horn. It is interesting to note that the Greeks used to speak of themselves as the goat's people, using the goat as a national or tribal symbol. And touched not the ground. These words very exactly fit the astonishing speed and completeness of Alexander's conquests. Daniel chapter 8 verse 6. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him in the fury of his power. As Appianus, the Roman historian, remarks, he, Alexander, was never defeated, and he finished almost every war in 1 or 2 battles. He acquired as much of the earth as he saw, and died while he was devising means to capture the rest. Daniel chapter 8 verse 7. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. And he was moved with choler against him. The word choler is Old English for anger. The language of this verse depicts the completeness of the subjection of Persia to Alexander. The power of the empire was completely broken. Arrian, about 100 to 170 AD, the Greek historian wrote, I am persuaded, there was no nation, city, nor people then in being, whither his, Alexander's, name did not reach, for which reason, whatever origin he might boast of, or claim to himself, there seems to me to have been some divine hand presiding over his birth and actions, insomuch that no mortal upon earth either excelled or equaled him. Daniel chapter 8 verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. The he-goat waxed very great. The ram, Medo-Persia, became great. The he-goat Greece became very great. When he was strong, the great horn was broken. The prophecy correctly describes the tragic end of Alexander, who died a few months before reaching the age of 33, not when he was old or worn out by overwhelming enemies but rather by his own intemperance. And for it came up 4 notable ones. Students of the history of these times know that within a comparatively few years, following the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC, the empire of Alexander was divided into exactly 4 parts. As the division was first made, Ptolemy got Egypt and thus became the king of the south, as spoken of in chapter 11. Seleucus had Syria and Babylon to the north of Palestine, becoming the king of the north. Lysimachus got Asia Minor, and Cassander had Macedonia and the adjacent lands. With the Mediterranean to the west and the desert to the east, there were no kings of either the west or the east, as spoken of by the Jews and Bible prophets. Daniel chapter 8 verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. Rome extended her territory around the Mediterranean. There was no place where her arms were not victorious. Some of the greatest battles which history records were fought by the Roman armies. It is interesting to notice that this fifth horn succeeds and far surpasses the previous powers, for it says it waxed exceeding great. The ram, or Medo-Persia, became great, verse 4, authorized version. The he-goat, or Alexander's empire, waxed very great, verse 8, authorized version. While this little horn waxed exceeding great. The little horn of this chapter clearly means Rome as a unit, first as an empire and then as an ecclesiastical power greater than any civil empire. In this chapter no distinction is made between the empire of Rome and the succeeding combination civil and church power, which for so many centuries has ruled the world from the same city. This little horn represents Rome in her entire career. Daniel chapter 8 verse 10. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Very similar language is used in the 12th chapter of Revelation, where the great red dragon is represented as casting a third of the stars of heaven down to the earth. Even to the host of heaven. This is suggestive of angels, but this little horn power, although described as exceeding great, being an earthly power, was unable to come in conflict with angels. However, verse 24 clarifies the matter by telling us that this power would destroy God's people. So the symbol host of heaven evidently refers to God's people. We are told by Hebrews chapter 12 verse 23, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn which are written in heaven. When we accept Christ we become members of God's family. Romans chapter 8 verse 14 says, For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are sons of God. Verse 17 says, And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. It cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Two figures are used in this passage, the host, and the stars. In verse 13 we are told that both the sanctuary and the host will be trodden underfoot. Undoubtedly this reference is to God's people and to their place of worship, and all worship is directed to the heavenly sanctuary. When we pray to God in heaven. Those prayers ascend to the heavenly sanctuary, to the throne of grace. The stars represent the leaders of the work of God on this earth, Paul, Peter, Savonarola, Huss, Jerome etc. The little horn which waxed exceeding great in its two aspects, pagan and papal, has been the greatest persecutor of all time. In the days of the tyrants Nero, Decius, and Diocletian, Christians were slaughtered by the thousands. Then the barbarous cruelty of the papacy has been unequaled. Notice this statement by the well-known historian Dr. Grattan Guinness. It is important that we should clearly grasp one great historical fact, i.e. the rule of Rome has never, since it first commenced, ceased to exist, save once, for a very brief period during the Gothic invasions. It has changed in character but it has continued. Rome ruled the known world at the first advent of Christ, and still rules hundreds of millions of mankind, and will continue to do so right up till the second advent of Christ. For not until the Son of Man takes the dominion of the earth, and establishes a kingdom that shall never pass away, is the monster representing Roman rule destroyed. The rule of Rome, we repeat, has never ceased. It was a secular pagan power for 5 or 6 centuries. It has been an ecclesiastical and apostate Christian power ever since. There lay a brief period between these two main stages, during which professing Christian emperors ruled from Rome, followed by an interval when, for a time, it seemed as if the great city had received a fatal blow from her Gothic captors. It seemed so, but it was not so, for the word of God cannot be broken. The rule of Rome revived in a new form, and was as real under the popes of the 13th century as it had been under Innocent III, as it had been under Nero and Domitian. The reality was the same, though the forms had changed. The Caesars did not persecute the witnesses of Jesus more severely and bitterly than did the popes. Diocletian did not destroy the saints or oppose the gospel more than did the Inquisition of papal days. Rome is one and the same all through, both locally and morally. Romanism and the Reformation, Church Historian. Daniel chapter 8 verse 11. Yeah, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Few terms in prophecy are more easily identified than this of the prince of the host. In verse 25 the prince of the host is referred to as the prince of the princes. In chapter 11 and verse 22, the prince of the covenant. All these terms refer to Jesus the Son of God, who was crucified under the authority of the Romans. Not only did pagan Rome exalt itself against the prince of the host, but the papacy claimed not only to be equal in power but to even have power over Christ. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away. By him, the little horn, the daily was taken away, and the place of his, the prince of the hosts, sanctuary was cast down. The word sacrifice is a supplied word, and does not belong to the text. The word daily signifies continuity, permanency. It is evident from the meaning of the word and from its context in Daniel 8, that Rome took away from Christ something which was intended to stand permanently, and is connected with his work in the sanctuary. The papacy has taken away Christ's work of intercession on behalf of sinners, for they claim that the priest has that power, also that Mary stands before the Father pleading for sinful man. The Roman Church has conferred upon Mary authority that surpasses that of Christ, even going so far as to state that if Satan were to humble himself and seek her aid for salvation, she would be magnanimous enough to grant him pardon and thus convert him. The daily refers to the continual mediation and intercession of Christ in the heavenly sanctuary. In its place the papacy substituted the intercession, or mediation of Mary, popes and earthly priests. People were taught to look to the Church, to its priests and pontiffs for forgiveness of sin and eternal salvation, instead of looking to Jesus Christ. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. At the time of Daniel and up to the time of Christ and his apostles, the place of his sanctuary was clearly understood as Jerusalem and the temple which it contained. Today the temple does not exist, but in the New Testament in the book of Hebrews and Revelation, we are clearly shown that it is the heavenly sanctuary that concerns God's people. The question might be asked, how has the papacy cast down the place of Christ's sanctuary? Firstly, by setting up a rival sanctuary on earth. The real presence of our divine Lord in the blessed Eucharist, the host kept in the monstrance, makes every Catholic Church a tabernacle of the Most High. She has instituted a human priesthood which claims divine powers, thus the priest may, in a certain manner, be called the creator of his creator, since by saying the words of consecration, he creates as it were, Jesus in the sacrament, by giving him a sacramental existence, and produces him as a victim to be offered to the eternal Father. As in creating the world it was sufficient for God to have said, "Let it be made," and it was created, he spoke, and they were made, so it is sufficient for the priest to say, "Hoc est corpus meum," and behold, the bread is no longer bread, but the body of Jesus Christ. Daniel chapter 8 verse 12. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced, and prospered. And an host was given him against the daily. Barbarians who attacked and spoiled Rome became converts to the Catholic faith, and Catholicism drew into her ranks millions of converts. This refers to the multitudes that fell under the influence of this power. And it cast down the truth to the ground. Rome has cast the truth to the ground by her persistent attacks on the Bible. She has corrupted the original text, has withheld the Bible from the people, has waged relentless war against the Word of God. By setting up a counterfeit system, she has robbed mankind of the great Bible truths regarding the heavenly sanctuary and of Christ's mediatorial work. And it practiced and prospered. It has practiced its deceptions on the people, practiced its schemes of cunning to carry out its own ends. Likewise it has prospered. It has made war with God's people and prevailed against them. It held supreme sway over all Europe, kings and subjects alike. Daniel chapter 8 verse 13, Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint that spoke, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? One angel asks a question and another answers it, for the benefit of Daniel. That means also for the benefit or enlightenment of the people of God, who live at the time or times spoken of. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice? If we simplify the question, this is how it would be: how long shall the sanctuary and host be trodden underfoot? How long shall they continue their course of oppression against God's people? We need to remember that at the time this was written, Babylon was still the ruler of the world. Daniel himself and all his people were still in captivity, the temple or sanctuary at Jerusalem was still in ruins, and had been in this condition for more than half a century. The prophet and his fellow believers were confident that the 70 years of predicted captivity were about ended, but the expected deliverance had not yet taken place, and the sanctuary and the host, or God's people, were still being trodden down by the arrogant rulers of the nations. This vision of Daniel 8 indicated that other empires would follow that would do the same, and that the little horn would be worse than any preceding. That is why he asked in horrified amazement, "How long is this sort of thing going to last?" And the transgression of desolation. The transgression that mocketh desolate, or the desolating transgression. It is a term which covers both the pagan and the papal systems of arrogant, false religion in conflict with the religion of God, because it is used here as applying to the entire length of time from the rise of this little horn, down to the establishment of Christ's eternal kingdom. To give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? Without question, Daniel and every other Jew of his time would understand the sanctuary to mean the temple which had stood on Mount Moriah, but was at this time in ruins. The host obviously means the people of God, the Jewish nation during its time, and since that time the Christian church. If ye be Christ's, then are ye Abraham's seed. Galatians chapter 3 verse 29. This prophecy extends for many centuries past the final desolation of the earthly sanctuary, and the rejection of the Jewish people. Daniel chapter 8 verse 14, "And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." The time mentioned here is specific and definite, but it does not tell us just when it begins. In chapter 9 there is provided a number of points regarding this time period, so we shall deal with it when we arrive at that chapter. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Two and only two sanctuaries are spoken of in the Bible, the one at Jerusalem, and the other one in heaven. The sanctuary in heaven is clearly revealed only in the New Testament and was scarcely known to the people of Daniel's day. As the Hebrew sanctuary consisted of three distinct parts, the court, the holy place, and the most holy, so Christ's priestly work consists of three successive phases. The first, which began on Calvary, must precede his ministry in the holy place. This in turn must precede his ministry in the most holy. He could not be a priest at all until he was anointed, and he became the anointed, or the Messiah, or the Christ, at his baptism. Before he could begin his heavenly work as priest, he had his own sacrificial blood to offer when he ascended and began his work as high priest in heaven. His final work as high priest is the cleansing of the sanctuary, when all record of sin is cleansed from the heavenly records. Daniel chapter 8 verse 15. "And it came to pass, when I, even I Daniel, had seen the vision, and sought for the meaning, then, behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man." And sought for the meaning. Daniel did not understand the meaning of what he had seen. Evidently, although Daniel was given such a detailed vision, he was unable to grasp the real significance of it. "There stood before me as the appearance of a man." Daniel longed for an understanding of what he had seen, and immediately there stood before the prophet one who had the appearance of a man. Once again we are shown the interest heaven has in mankind. Just as Christ in the book of Revelation encouraged John the Revelator, so Christ comes to encourage Daniel. Notice the next verse. Daniel chapter 8 verse 16. "And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called, and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision." The name Gabriel occurs only here and in chapter 9 verse 21. Christ appearing as a man, stood before the prophet, and to Gabriel he said, "Make this man to understand the vision." Christ had appeared at the time of the fiery furnace to stand by his faithful followers. In this passage it is obvious that Gabriel is being addressed by one higher in rank, who had power to command and control his work. Daniel chapter 8 verse 17. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. In the account given by John in the Revelation, the sight of the angel had a very similar effect upon the apostle. There was however this difference: John fell at the feet of the angel to worship, from which act he was restrained, while Daniel on this occasion seems to be completely overcome with awe and reverence. For at the time of the end shall be the vision. This remark by the angel is proof that the vision would not be correctly understood until long centuries had passed, or until the time of the end had arrived. This important fact that the visions were not meant to be understood by the people of Daniel's day, but only down near the close of time or the end of this earth's history. This is stated twice more in this chapter, verses 19 and 26, is repeated twice again with still greater emphasis in the last chapter, chapter 12 verses 4 and 9. Daniel chapter 8 verse 18. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me, and set me upright. Daniel seems to have been completely overcome by the majesty of the heavenly messenger. He prostrated himself with his face to the ground. The angel laid his hand upon him to give him assurance, and then lifts him from this helpless and prostrate position. Daniel chapter 8 verse 19. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. Gabriel took up the history of the kingdoms one by one, and assured Daniel that this term, the latter time of the indignation, refers to the final judgments upon this world. Daniel chapter 8 verse 20. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. When we consider that this prophecy was written before the fall of Babylon, when all these events, the full career of the Medo-Persian Empire, the meteoric career of Greece under her first king Alexander, his untimely death and the breaking up of his empire into 4 parts, we are still in the future, we cannot but marvel at the remarkable accuracy of the prophecy. Daniel chapter 8 verse 21. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. This verse explains one of the symbols in the early part of the chapter. Daniel chapter 8 verse 22. Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. The accurate fulfillment of these features of the vision assures us that what follows will surely come to pass as predicted. Daniel chapter 8 verse 23. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance, and understanding dark sentences, shall stand up. In the latter time. That is, after the divisions of Alexander's empire had existed for some time. The empire of Rome arose gradually, and attained supremacy only after the divisions of the Macedonian empire had become weak. When the transgressors are come to the full. The transgressors are those who have oppressed God's people. Also they are God's chosen people, who because of their transgressions were oppressed by these successive powers. It was on account of the transgressions of his people that they were sold into captivity. Their continuance in sin brought more and more severe punishment. At no time were the Jews as a nation more corrupt morally, than at the time they came under the jurisdiction of the Romans. A king of fierce countenance. This is a direct quotation from the prophecy of Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 28 verses 49 to 55, where the reference can apply only to the Romans, with special emphasis on the complete destruction of the Jewish nation under Titus in AD 70. Understanding dark sentences. This applies to Rome in both its imperial and papal phases. Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 28 referred to Rome as a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. The Roman Church has for centuries used a language that could not be readily understood by the layman, Latin. Daniel chapter 8 verse 24. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper, and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the people. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. Papal Rome became mighty by the support given to her by secular governments. We are told in Revelation chapter 13 verse 2, the dragon gave him his power, and his throne, and great authority. It was a supernatural power that was behind the tremendous authority of papal Rome. And he shall destroy wonderfully. A better rendering is, cause frightful destruction. The terrible destructive nature of this power has not been equaled in history. Not only was this power destructive in the sense of persecution, but also it destroyed the great truths of the Bible. In Young's literal translation, destroy wonderfully, reads, wonderful things he destroyed. This does suggest that pagan doctrines were substituted for the Bible truths, and shall prosper and practice. It is almost incredible the way papal Rome has prospered, despite the barbarous cruelty she has shown to those who have disagreed with her. And shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. By both persecution and by false doctrine Rome has destroyed God's people and will continue to do so until the end. Daniel chapter 8 verse 25. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken with hand. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. Craft is better rendered deceit. Rome has been distinguished by the deceptions she has practiced. It has been a policy of craft or deceit that has brought the nations under its control. And he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. The Pope has termed himself as the King of Kings and even Lord of Lords, claiming that he has power of the earth and even over the angels and God himself. In the destruction of the French Huguenots, peaceful overtures were made to these loyal God-fearing people, but in one foul swoop the papal soldiers slaughtered them while they were peacefully sleeping. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. As in other prophecies covering much the same ground, there is a blending of the characteristics and work of Rome in both stages of her career. The standing up against the prince of princes obviously refers to the death of Jesus of Nazareth, who was executed under the official orders of a Roman governor. On the other hand, the prediction that he shall magnify himself in his heart, is much more applicable to the papal phase, for it is how he is described by Paul as the man of sin, who exalts himself above God. He shall be broken without hand. This is in the future and carries us forward to the time of the setting up of the kingdom of God. Daniel chapter 8 verse 26. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true, wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. This refers back to the period of 2,300 evenings and mornings, or this many days, since the Hebrews always began their day with the evening. Although the angel explained the animal symbols, he did not explain this period of time. The angel merely assured him that this time symbol was true and reliable, though it did point forward to many days to come. Possibly the reason the angel did not explain is that he knew that Daniel had heard about all he could stand, and was about to collapse. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. The fulfillment of the various details of the vision would extend into the distant future. Daniel chapter 8 verse 27. And I Daniel fainted, and was sick certain days, afterward I rose up, and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Despite the fact that Daniel was sickened and dismayed at what seemed an almost endless postponement of the restoration of his country and temple, where Jehovah could be worshipped, he went about the king's business as usual. He was faithful at all times.